quick Devar Torah that we're still on the subject of the scouts. Very interesting. We have to ask, what was the sin that the scouts made? We know the sin of the people of believing them, but what was the sin of the scouts? Why did they give such a bad report? Because the parsha begins with God telling Moses, send these people out for you, not for me. I already know what the land is like. You don't have to give me an insider account. But the people should know that it's a good land, etc. So the scouts are sent out, and 10 of the 12 give a very bad report, and the people get all upset. And like I pointed out, wait a minute. These are the people. Remember what these people have witnessed in their life. Okay? They were in the generation that left Egypt. They saw the plagues in Egypt. It wasn't a story. They were at the crossing of the Sea of Reeds. Again, not a story. They saw these things. They were at Mount Sinai. Okay, so in other words, these are people, stop and think about it. They had witnessed were things beyond our comprehension. And God had promised us this land. And when the scouts came back with a bad report, they believed them. Like, God is sending us to die to a land that, we won't be able to do it because we're like grasshoppers in the eyes of the inhabitants. We just can't do it. It's impossible. So the question comes, why? How could they say that? And the answer is very fundamental and something that we sometimes miss. Remember, this was also the generation, they had been slaves. And one of the things that happens to slaves is a slave has no initiative. Any initiative that slave has will be knocked out of them. Plus, when you stop and think about it, if somebody's a slave, why would he have initiative? He's a slave today, he'll be a slave tomorrow. He'll just do what the master tells him. And if it's stupid, who cares? It's what the master wants. He has no initiative. What has to happen is the Jews have to learn to be free people. They have to learn initiative. And this is a lesson that comes through. If you look at the story of the Exodus, there's a number of little places where initiative is being awarded. God tells the Jews to this whole thing with putting the sheep and the blood on the doorpost, so that the angel of death will know who's a Jew and who's an Egyptian. You're telling me that God needs us to tell him who's a Jew and who's an Egyptian? What God is saying is you have to take an initiative. You have to do something. At the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, Moses prays to God. God says, shut up and cross the sea. Literally. What are you yelling at me for? And the sea doesn't split until Nakshan jumps in the water. In other words, initiative has to be shown. And this is an important aspect of the story. Initiative has to be shown. That God wants to help us, but we have to show some initiative too. It's not a one-way street. I once heard this guy saying that if you're religious, God will reward you with money, as if God's an ATM machine. No, it doesn't work that way. If you need money, you have to figure out how to get money legally. What? Speak for yourself. Because it says in Pirkei Avot, in the chapters of the fathers, if you don't teach your son a trade, you'll teach him to be a thief, because he has to support himself somehow. This is the point now that God is coming down saying, that what Joshua and Caleb saw was, yes, all these problems are real, but we can do it. We have the initiative, and we add to it, God's going to help us. But in order for us to do these things, we have to take the initiative. And this is a very important point, that just because you were born in, say, poor or in a caste like in India, doesn't mean you're going to stay in that situation. You can raise yourself. This is what God is trying to get across. Free people can either move up or down the economic ladder. Slaves cannot. In a lot of these societies, you could not. But God is saying we're not having that type of society, having a society where initiative is rewarded. Something to think about.